We all experience a heavy center of gravity behind our eyes, a visceral sense of a permanent, singular me experiencing the world. Buddhist psychology identifies this specific sensation of an independent identity as svabhava, the conviction that things possess their own inherent, self-contained existence. In the 7th century, the scholar monk Chandrakirti systematized a method for dismantling this cognitive construct in his text The Madhyamaka Avatara. This is the Madhyamaka, or middle way, tradition. Unlike contemplative practices that focus on passive observation, this methodology applies a logical algorithm to the mind's own internal structure. By isolating the specific misconceptions that keep a mind in cyclic suffering, this approach aims to systematically dismantle the foundations of that distress. To run this algorithm, we must first establish the ontological baseline of the system, known as the Two Truths doctrine. The first is conventional truth. This is the everyday reality we navigate, a world of cause and effect, where physical and mental phenomena interact in complex, dependent webs. This diagram reveals the second concept, ultimate truth. If you look at the nature of these same functioning objects, they're found to be empty of any permanent, independent essence. By walking through the precise steps of this ancient algorithm, we can map its mechanics directly onto the frameworks of modern clinical psychology. Mastering the distinction between these two truths allows the mind to function in the world, while avoiding the psychological traps of both eternalism and nihilism. The primary tool for this deconstruction is a process called the 4-point analysis. Step 1 is to ascertain the object. Generate a vivid sense of your independent I, recalling a memory of intense fear or pride until the ego feels solid and undeniable. Step 2 establishes the logical boundary of pervasion. If this solid, independent self actually exists, it must either be identical to your physical body and mind or entirely separate from them. In a sealed room, a cockroach must exist as exactly one entity or many. There is no third option. This sets an inescapable trap. If the ego is neither identical to your parts nor separate from them, its inherent existence cannot be established. You cannot dismantle a psychological defense mechanism without first defining its absolute logical boundaries. Step 3 refutes oneness. If your self were identical to your physical body, you would just be a constantly shifting collection of thousands of changing parts, making a singular identity impossible. Chandrakirti expanded this logic into the 7-fold reasoning, applying it through the analogy of a chariot. Take this stone chariot. Apply the logic. Is the chariot its wheels? Is it the axle? Or the specific shape of the stone? Step 4 refutes manyness, asking if the self could exist apart from physical and mental aggregates. This 3D wireframe demonstrates the process. If you conceptually dissolve the wheels, the axles, and the frame, an independent chariot does not remain behind. Under the force of this scrutiny, the mind encounters a specific logical failure. The solid, independent self becomes entirely unfindable. This methodical failure forces the mind to drop its habit of objectifying reality and identity. When the intellect's grip breaks, the practitioner pivots to stabilization, resting on the absence of a findable self. This stage carries severe risk. Without guidance, a practitioner can fall into a dissociative, nihilistic state. When the ego's reality collapses, the psychological sensation is like solid ground shattering, leaving the mind falling into a vast empty space. The algorithm requires practitioners to interrogate this blank space, eventually revealing that even this state of emptiness arises only through causes and conditions. Navigating this step is critical. It transitions the mind away from the terror of nihilism and toward the realization of a dependently arisen reality. To understand the precision of the Madhyamaka mechanism, we contrast it with other major Buddhist frameworks. The Theravada approach focuses on observing the arising and falling of concepts to realize their impermanence. The Yogacara school posits consciousness itself as the primary foundation of reality, a premise Madyamaka specifically rejects. Traditions like Dzogchen and Mahamudra teach practitioners to rest in natural awareness, bypassing formal analytical deconstruction. This matrix visualizes these targets using a wave. Theravada observes its movement, Dzogchen recognizes it as water, and Madhyamaka dismantles the assumption that an independent wave exists. Madhyamaka weaponizes logical dialectics to exhaust and stop the mind's habit of cognitive grasping. While traditions share an ultimate aim, their differing ontological baselines dictate the specific meditative technologies deployed. This ancient dialectical algorithm has a direct translation in modern clinical psychology. We see its mechanics operating in evidence-based treatments like acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. ACT is built on the understanding that human suffering is generated by language and cognitive fusion, mistaking fleeting thoughts for absolute reality. The Madhyamaka deconstruction of the solid self maps directly onto the clinical concept of self as context, shifting a person from being trapped in a rigid identity to becoming the observer of their mental events. Clinical science is utilizing the same cognitive architecture to treat severe distress that ancient traditions used to investigate the nature of reality. A second equivalency exists between the realization of emptiness and the clinical mechanism of cognitive diffusion. Diffusion trains a person to observe their thoughts as fleeting events rather than absolute truths, stripping away their power to dictate behavior. This flowchart illustrates the bridge. The unfindability of the chariot through ancient logic achieves the same cognitive unbinding as modern clinical diffusion. Both systems share a practical utility. They weaken the cognitive grasping that drives anxiety and emotional reactivity. This leads to the central tension of the middle way. Deconstructing the I does not destroy the person. Realizing that you lack a fixed, inherent essence allows you to operate with greater flexibility and compassion in the everyday world. Rather than a void of non-existence, this realization provides the mind with a form of operational flexibility, creating a baseline for navigating the world through a more responsive, dependently arisen perspective.